Good evening, residents of Everett, Washington. I'd like to call to order the Everett City Council meeting of October 4th, 2023. The City Council meets all requirements of the State of Washington Open Public Meetings Act. Community members are welcome to join either in person, remote, on Zoom, or by calling in. For those who wish to participate in the future on Zoom, you'll find the instructions to register for public comment on the City Council, or the City of Everett website under the City Council Department. Please note we do not allow comments on any kind of campaigning, whether for or against ballot measures or candidates running for office. We also do not allow comments focused on personal matters that are unrelated to city business. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Mayor Franklin.
Excused?
Councilmember Zarlingo.
Here.
Councilmember Vogely.
Here.
Councilmember Fossey.
Here.
Vice President Dewey.
Here.
Councilmember Schwab.
Here.
Councilmember Ryan.
Here.
President Stonecipher.
Here. And Councilmember Schwab, would you please lead us in the flag salute?
Your Honor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Councilmember Zarlingo, would you please read the land acknowledgement?
Certainly. This council wishes to acknowledge the original inhabitants of this place, the Snohomish people, and their successors, the Tulalip tribes. Since time immemorial, they've hunted, fished, gathered on, and taken care of these lands and waters. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self-determination, and honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and the water. We will strive to be honest about our past mistakes and bring about a future that includes their people, stories, and voices to form a more just and equitable society.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of September 27th?
Councilmember Ryan so moves. Second.
Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Zarlingo.
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely.
Yes.
Councilmember Fossey.
Yes.
Vice President Dewey.
Yes.
Councilmember Schwab.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes. And this evening we have the Alliance for Housing Affordability Program Manager, Chris Collier, here to provide us with a briefing. Please come forward. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And that was faster than I expected. So, okay.
We put you right up on top of the agenda.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I will try to be quick and keep it to about 15 minutes. I'm here to provide what I hope will be more of a quarterly update to the city on what is happening in housing in the city of Everett. And in future updates, I can provide other information about the city of Everett. So tonight, a snapshot of what the housing market in Everett is looking like. Quick background on what the heck the Alliance for Housing Affordability is, in case you haven't heard of it recently. It is an interlocal agreement between 15 cities, the county, and the County Housing Authority, not EHA. These are the member jurisdictions. Just recently added the town of Darrington last week, so that's exciting, with the goal of supporting the members and their communities and understanding and responding as appropriate to housing unaffordability in their jurisdictions. So that is what the Alliance is and provides to the city of Everett, as well as the other member cities in the county. So getting right to the information, what is going on in the city of Everett? In 2022, this is a lot of numbers. On purpose, recognizing this is in your packets as a PDF, this is the cost of housing in the city of Everett for 2022 in aggregate. A single-family home sold for about $619,000 in 2022. Given typical loan terms, a 30-year term, 10% down, real interest rates, you needed about $130,000 as a household to afford that home in the city of Everett. 710 sold, single-family homes. This is according to the county assessor's office, recording properties sold within the city limits of Everett. Townhomes and condominiums, considerably more affordable, only 230 sold. Rental data, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom apartments, we're renting for this much from August until December of 2022. I do a 3 times a month survey of apartments.com, so this is not contract rent. This is what people shopping for apartments would find on average in the last quarter or so of 2022. Assuming you need 3 times the average rent per month to afford it, to qualify to renting that place, the required income is between $75,000 and $100,000 to rent an apartment in the city of Everett in 2022. And the numbers are on the right are how many we're actually selling, or renting, excuse me. And mobile home parks are often forgotten. Understandably, there's not a whole lot selling, but it's notable that a mobile home park home, so not a manufactured home, a mobile home park home sold for $155,000 in the city of Everett. On average in Snohomish County, this is the number that I recall off the top of my head, the median age of those homes is 40 years old. HUD estimates that a mobile home's useful life is 30 to 50 years. So keep in mind that $155,000, that's up almost 50% from 2 years prior. So you're paying a rather high amount of money for something that's basically at the end of its useful life. So that's worth noting. Also, home sales, single-family townhome condo, below $400,000, just an arbitrary figure that I picked. Required income is $67,000 and only 151 sold. A majority of them were townhomes or condominiums. How did things change into 2023? You can see that prices fell. Again, this is a lot of numbers, I recognize that, so I hope that you'll take the time before or after this presentation to review these numbers in more detail. In brief, prices fell, but required incomes rose. This is for both reasons because of interest rates, which went from about 2.2% in 2022 to 6.4% on average for 2023 so far. The current interest rate for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage nationally is about 7% and change. So this number is continuing to rise. What you see is the cost is going down. That's something that we see reported in the papers not infrequently. What's often not reported is, but required income went up because the price didn't fall enough to offset the rise in interest rates in your monthly mortgage. Also, apartment rents in the last 12 months from August to August are staying roughly flat, which is expected. You've seen this in King County, that apartment rents are actually falling a little bit in King County. So we'll see what this does. Yes, sir.
A question about the mobile home park sales before we get away from it. If I understand, most of the time, unlike single-family homes or the townhomes and condos, that sales price is for the structure and its presence there. It does not include the underlying land. So for equivalence, that should also have added then the space rents on those kinds of things?
Unfortunately, I don't have the pad rent costs. I only have the sale price as recorded by the county assessor. So that is something that would be factored in, and good catch on that.
Yeah, I just didn't want to misinterpret that.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. That's only the purchase price of the improvement on the pad, not including pad rent and any other fees on top of it.
Right, and I think the common thing is if the pad is no longer available, the structure is generally worth nothing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Especially when it's 40 years old. So.
Great, thank you. And if this is something you're going to cover in a future slide, feel free to punt it till later. So the column for required income, that dollar amount is what the bank would require, but it's not necessarily the required income for affordability, because there could be other factors like childcare costs or
Absolutely.
more childcare costs, I
Yes.
guess. So can you clarify a little bit more about what required income means and what's included in that?
Yes, you're absolutely right that that's what the bank would want you to have to consider you a safe lending prospect. Across the bottom, I put the loan terms that I use to calculate that. It's the sale price plus the payment function of principal and interest, which is the sale price, the interest rate, the term, and then interest and taxes are put on top of that, or insurance and taxes are put on top of that. So I took the average City of Everett property tax rate and an assumption of $1 of insurance for every $1,000 of assessed value and added that all together, then applied a 33% maximum, that your debt to income ratio, this is what the bank really cares about, is how much debt they think you as a household can carry based on your particular financials. I set that figure at 33%, which is close to the 30% figure that we often hear quoted in housing affordability. So yes, this is what the bank would want. It does not take into account childcare costs or other things the bank wouldn't care about. I don't have an assumption for other debt by the household. That's why the 33% figure is a little lower than you might expect. Or, well, home buyers can get away with 40% or 50%. Yes, if they have lower debts. So I set that a little lower to account for that. So yes, this is again the required income that a bank will want you to have given these loan terms and these particulars. So it does not take into account childcare costs, things like that. So, excellent question, thank you. And again, mobile home parks are declining in price, but that's quite recent and still much, much higher than they were in 2021. And this is for the city of Everett, which I have a smaller pool of data for. In Snohomish County, you see something really amazing where after you adjust for inflation, mobile home park homes sell for about $30,000 to $40,000 about 15, 18 years ago. They're now selling for north of $130,000, which is really stark when you say, well, it's, surely there's a deal out there somewhere. Not too much. So what? So who cares? Why does this matter? I mean, it matters because 71,000 of the city's workers commute into work every day in the year 2020. That's according to the Census Bureau, LEHG on the map, which is way too nerdy for me to go into, but the Census Bureau estimates that 86.5% of the city's workforce commutes in every day. They work in the city, they live somewhere else. How much has that changed? In 2002, going back as far as I can, that number was 81.9% of the city's workforce, or 50.6 thousand people commuted in every day. So we're going in the wrong direction. But what about that? I mean, so this is a 20,500 person difference, but the percentages only changed marginally. That's really because the city's population and workforce were changing underneath these figures at the same time. So that's why the percentages haven't changed too much. I would point out the 20,500 figure as something that's really alarming. Because as I'll comment on later, how's that greenhouse gas emission reduction work going, right? It's not. So expanding on this, so what? So required income and workforce. You must be this tall to ride. That's how I describe the required income figure in other presentations. You must be this tall to ride if given these circumstances. This is how many workers in the Puget Sound region are not. This is looking at Bureau of Labor Statistics, occupational wage and employment data. And so it's for Snohomish, King, and Pierce County. If you work in King County, you can't live there, you're probably looking up north or down south. 1 bedroom, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, again, 3 times the rent, just as a rule of thumb. For the region, 1.2 million workers cannot afford a 1 bedroom apartment in Everett without becoming cost burdened. I want to stress that without becoming, many of them are renting and they're paying 40, 50, 60, 70% of their income to rent. But assuming you don't want to be cost burdened, this is what you're looking at. 3 bedroom rents, you need to make $100,400. Sorry, $100,400. It's been a long day. I have a 5-month-old. I didn't sleep much. So 1.5 million people can't afford a 3 bedroom rent on a single income. Well, but Chris, and I have heard this verbatim from an elected person before, not in this city. But Chris, I thought everyone comes out of college married. All right. Have you tried being married so that you can afford a place to live? Recognizing that we're talking about including 1 bedroom apartments. So we have to be talking about marriage because I can't imagine having a roommate in a 1 bedroom apartment. That's a little too cozy, even for me, as a former college student. Even with that, you're still looking at almost 200,000 people when you combine incomes. You assume 2 people are making equal income because usually a barista doesn't marry a doctor, right? Usually you have people of commensurate incomes or equivalent incomes living together. Even then, you're looking at 200,000 people almost can't even afford a 1 bedroom apartment in Everett. Up to 790,000 people going in together. It's a dual income household, roommate or cohabitation or whatever, can't do it in the city of Everett. And of course, single family homes and townhomes and condominiums.
Chris, a couple questions.
Yes, ma'am.
So the 1.2 million workers, that is not in Everett, obviously, that's.
Correct. That's the region.
Okay.
Right.
And then I'm having a hard time understanding the math for marriage. So if I read this right, for a 1 bedroom, you need $74,800
Correct.
a year.
If you don't want to be cost burdened, yes.
Right, and so twice that would be
Or divide it in half.
140,000.
So divide that in half. Assume that you have 2 people making half of what they need. One person contributes half, the other person contributes the other half. Okay, let's combine our income so that we can afford it. Because the middle column, this is how many workers are not able to do that, is on a single income, here's who can or cannot afford it.
Right.
Let's say we have 2 incomes, right? Because there are dual income households, that's quite normal these days. So let's talk about households that are joining their incomes together. So let's say we do that. This is still, even if you join your income, 191,000 workers, even with their combined incomes, will not be able to afford a one-bedroom apartment.
Okay, I'm sorry, I thought that was the number of workers. I thought that was the income. I was like, I don't
Got it. No,
understand that.
that's the number of
income. That's the
workers
number
who,
of
even
workers.
with
Okay,
combined incomes,
got it.
can't do it.
Okay, thank you.
And so even if you combine incomes with a single-family home, 1 million people in the central Puget Sound region, Snohomish, King, Pierce County, could not afford to buy today in the city of Everett, given the loan terms I quoted earlier. You know, that's a lot of people. That's about half the workforce in the central Puget Sound region. In Everett, which, you know, we kind of understand is more affordable than Seattle and most of King County, right? In Everett. So I hope that that's stark and impressive. But to drive it home a little more, like I mentioned, greenhouse gas reduction emissions, economic productivity. How much more could you do with your time that you spend commuting far and further and further and further? Because this is a story repeated up north on I-5 out to Darrington, where the price has risen by over 100% in the last 20 years. You know, think about the lost economic productivity that represents. Healthcare, people that are cost burdened, that are living closer to where they work, and in exchange are not taking as good a care of their health. They wait and they wait and they wait and they wait, and now it's an emergency. Now it's more expensive. You know, there's a section that I talk about this in other presentations of charity care. When healthcare becomes charity care, you know, this is part of the reason why. Increasing inflation pressure. When, you know, the price of goods and services is in part reflective of cost of living, right? And the unquantifiable, the lost time with kids, influencing their lives, participating in the community, volunteering on a board or commission. I would, but I don't have the time because I drive too far, I'm too stressed, right? If we feel, we in this room, everybody here in society feels the drag on society that I'm more stressed, I feel more hopeless, you know, all of those negative things that just news is covering nationally, locally, that stress, you know, part of that I would lay at the feet of housing unaffordability, that you're just stressed about that this is unquantifiable, but it's there. It's worth recognizing. Part two, well, I don't know anyone that you just described. I still don't care. So what? I don't know anyone that you just described. Don't you? If you have kids and you struggle to put them in childcare, you do know someone, because childcare workers only make $41,000 a year in the central Puget Sound region. So we're including King County in this. Not included on this slide is in 2019 we had 4,000 and change childcare workers. We now have about 1,800. There's probably a reason for that, because their salary 3 years ago was about $38,000 a year. They can afford $968 a month for rent without becoming cost burdened. You do know people that are struggling. This is an issue that affects you personally, whether you're stably housed or not. And I'm saying this not for the council members, but for anyone that might be listening. It says, well, I don't know anyone. We do. School bus drivers. I got an alert from my son's school yesterday that 2 routes were closed because they didn't have enough school bus drivers. I had put the slide together before I got that alert. That was convenient. This represents some of over 440 different occupations that the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics tracks. Persons in family, this is an important consideration for affordability and drives home more the point that you do know someone. If you have 2 people in the family and you make less than $80,750, you are low income by federal standards. That represents a lot of people. And this does not mean just 2 earners, it means 1 adult and a child. That counts for the household count. So we might be discovering in this moment, I'm actually low income. My goodness. So it's question, sorry.
No, you can finish your thought, go ahead.
Just, this is something that, again, what I'm trying to impress is that what is affordable, what is low income or cost burdened reaches much higher than we know, and it touches people that we know personally. It might even be us or people in our family today. Go ahead, thank you.
Thank you. It might be a typo, so I apologize for pointing it out. So massage therapist makes less than a commercial pilot but can afford more per month?
That is a typo.
Okay, sorry.
I apologize. Thank you very much for catching
Yeah,
that.
sorry.
No, thank you. That's excellent.
Thanks.
So that is a typo. I will double check and I'll get back to you on that. back on track. This is more than we can dismiss as individual moral failing or laziness. That's something that is often thrown at, I hear this because I work inside the housing authority, well, they're just lazy. The people on the housing authority's programs that qualify for housing authority services. Bootstraps, right? This is more, you can't label 440 different occupations over 1 million people with that moniker and be serious. This is more than that. This is something that we have to recognize as more than that. It's a systemic issue. Enter affordable housing. There is a typo in this as well. I sincerely apologize. This should say 2022. This is qualifying very low income households in Snohomish County that make $58,250 a year for a household size of 3, recalling the previous slide. The Housing Authority 2 years ago asked me to figure this out. I just updated it 2 days ago, so that's the typo. How many people qualify for our programs? How many people are very low income in Snohomish County? There we go, 2022 qualifying households versus how much we have to assist them. 68,458 households are described as having 3 people and making $58,000 or less a year. We have 68,500 very low income households in Snohomish County last year. There we go. The Housing Authority can serve 6,200 of them between their Housing Choice Vouchers, or Section 8, and their income restricted housing portfolio. That's Edmonds Highlands, Jackson House, just up the street, so on and so forth. The Everett Housing Authority, I just asked them yesterday, has 3,700 units of assistance. Again, vouchers or their units currently in service. Other income restricted housing not owned by either housing authority is 11,000 units or so. This misses multifamily tax exempt properties, but it also does not screen out the use of a housing choice voucher in one of these units. That's doubling up. It's something a little wonky, but I can explain if you would like. Oops, sorry. No. Tut tut, there we go. But that's it. This is the fullest extent of our housing assistance in Snohomish County. Some of these housing units are for 80% AMI households, and so shouldn't be included, but I did, just to try and make this a little less grim. When I'm saying that we're leaving 70% of our very low-income households to figure it out every night. Figure it out means for most very low-income households being severely cost-burdened. It is not a joke when I say that over 50% of Snohomish County renters spend more than 50% of their take-home income on rent every month. That's from the U.S. Census Bureau. Other stories, anecdotally, from the town of Darrington are people figuring it out by living in a tent. Talking to this Darrington School District Superintendent, a story from her, Tracy Frank, that people are living in a tent in someone's backyard, running an extension cord out to the tent, and that's where they live. And other means of figuring it out. That's what's happening with this orange slice. What does success look like? Trying to be brief. What success looks like is rent and sale prices slows down. It allows incomes to catch up. Just let's hold things steady for a little while. It's unrealistic, in my opinion, to expect the cost of housing to come down, materially to come down. Certainly because, if for no other reason, it would create tremendous pushback from people whose financial planning relies on the current state of things. If you go below that, financial plans start falling apart. Projects start not maintaining themselves anymore. It gives existing systems more room to breathe. Instead of just life support, you get life-changing help. So just keeping people going from one crisis to the next, keeping them like a donation from a church. Instead of that, just staving off disaster for one more day, one more week, one more month. It changes someone's life for the better. It's the inflection point where they start going up and stops going down. That's what success looks like. Vouchers, for example, are practically speaking permanent. The Housing Authority's voucher portfolio is 25% senior or disabled or both. Practically speaking, people with fixed income, seniors, disability, will never leave the program. Even if you're neither of those things and you're getting job training, going back to school, you saw the numbers of how many millions of people are fully employed, but they're still struggling. So when you go get job training and you're still going to struggle, how much have we really improved ourselves? If we want metrics, it's a 6% rental vacancy rate, which is the point at which rents stay flat. Above it, rents go down. Below it, rents go up. We're at about 4% rental vacancy rate right now. 4 to 5 months of housing supply is where prices stay approximate or about where they are. Again, we're below that according to the Northwest Multiple Listing Service. So calibrating our focus. Should we do all market, all subsidy, mix of both, something? The Upjohn Institute for Employment Research estimated in a study that for every 100 market rate units, not giving a price, just 100 market rate units, 45 to 70 and 17 to 39 households below median and the bottom quintile income tracts, respectively, will upgrade their housing circumstances in within 5 years. Point being, market rate housing has downstream impacts in a few years because new housing product goes on the market, people that can afford it buy it, they vacate where they were, people can upgrade. So we can do both. We can and should do both. You have a housing authority, you have the private market builders. We can do both. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. But the core of this, and why I'm presenting this to the city, is that your comprehensive plan, your zoning map, and incentives and outreach, hi York, are the catalyst for both of these things. Both income restricted housing and private market development. It's the city's responsibility, opportunity, to catalyze these things into action. So that's where the city enters this picture. And my final point is that I encourage, whether we're doing more market, more subsidy, is that recognize this moment for what it is, a generational shift in how we do urban design. That if I'm going back to where this all started, it would be the post-World War II suburban experiment of let's make suburbia happen. That wasn't really a thing in the war. The music is stopping on the suburban experiment. And we need to recognize that and the generational shift that today represents and the opportunity that we have today to guide that generational shift into the future as the city. So with that, I will stop talking and answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilmember Vogeley.
I don't know that I have any questions for you, Mr. Collier, but thank you for coming out and sharing all of that horrible information.
My pleasure.
Usually we get, the down low sadness from Susie in budget. But today it's you. And I did last week, I think, give the information out that you sent.
Yes.
And we're going to be putting the ILA on consent one of these weeks. And I don't know, let's see, a couple of slides back, I was thinking of the family that was here last month and how, they've got 2 adults, 5 kids, a dog, disabilities, and they're just getting Band-Aids essentially every day or week or month. I think they are finally getting a place in Skagit. And that's a whole nother thing. But yes, people really exist that you're talking about, and they even come and visit us sometimes. And just yesterday, I met another person who has just got 2 days homeless and has a truck, thankfully, and is trying to figure out how to do it. So, I don't know. Thank you.
Councilmember
Pleasure.
Fossey.
Thank you for the fantastic presentation. I always enjoy them when you provide them. It's a really kind of good overview and scope of the issues that we're facing. On your previous slide, just before this one, you were kind of talking about like what your city solutions look. Again, there we go. Well, you're
we
just
go.
way too
Hold
far.
on.
You had talked about
Yes.
like the comp plan and incentives and outreach. 2 parts. What do you mean by outreach? And then would you just throw us a couple, for those listening at home, a couple things that fall into those different buckets, the zoning mats, comprehensive plans, incentives, outreach, et cetera?
Yeah. Comprehensive plan is, I would leave that to York to talk about, what that all can be. But that's the opportunity to really lay out the roadmap of where the city wants to go and the vision. Zoning map is allow opportunities, allow options. I was talking with someone at Hasco today about actually where zoning came from. It was originally proposed in 1920, over 100 years ago, by a man by the name of Edward M. Bassett, described as the father of zoning, and in it he describes zoning as a dynamic tool for cities to respond to current changes. And I take that and I compare it to the current day, where think about the last time the city really cracked open the zoning map. And if you've watched the Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones, you open the Ark of the Covenant, your face melts off. You don't do it very often because it's really painful. The zoning map has been very slow to change. And I'm not calling out Everett specifically or anything about the city, but just as a general cultural practice, we don't change our zoning map very much. And so our zoning practices very much. And so what the zoning culture of today is, what it gets us is looking at 2015 land use elements for all cities and adding them up, adding the acreage up of what can be used for what. For residentially zoned land or acreage parcels that can accept a residential use, 80% of that was for single-family homes, period. Nothing else, right? And that's not flexible because it's only one use. It's a single-family home. Nothing else, not a duplex, not anything more than. So allow inclusivity, allow variety in zoning. Well, what does that look like? When's the last time you went to the Edmonds Bowl? Because that's not single-family, but that's a nice place, right? That's the second most economically productive area in Snohomish County. There's more to changing your zoning than giving something away. You might get something in return, which is, again, the Edmonds Bowl, Everett Edition, really nice place. Incentives for development, low-income housing. For example, just the rule of thumb that I've heard from builders is 30 dwelling units per acre is where projects really start to work and things really start to happen. Just as a benchmark and a goal, what incentives you give allow projects to happen below that dwelling units per acre figure. So whether it's fee waivers, whether it's a density bonus, again, a density bonus affecting dwelling units per acre, things like that really starts to make things happen. And outreach, what I mean by outreach, and this is where I'll talk the most, is a lot of these things are permitted. York might be sitting behind me going, well, all of these things are already done. Builders don't understand that. In talking with builders, there's so much suspicion of cities. There's so much suspicion of, well, the cities are going to change their minds, they're going to yank the rug out from under us, things are just going to be chaos. My mortgage lenders don't trust anybody. They just want to do the things that we know will sell, single-family homes. That's what outreach is outreach to say, this is how it can work. We will be your partner. We're there to work with you and to get this done. If you're there to work with us in good faith, of course. But that's that outreach, not just to the community, which I hope I have loaded up some of that outreach. And this is why the city thinks it's a priority in this presentation, but outreach to builders and their lenders is really, really valuable. Talking with lenders, they say, well, if a city does something new, we're just going to sit and wait for 2 to 3 years to see what happens. One, because we're not desperate for work. We've got plenty of stuff lined up. And two, because we're going to wait to see if someone else takes advantage of it first. And of course, if everyone does that, we're kind of stuck, right? Making that first step, making that outreach can be very valuable. And I think is very important, both for the community, talking about this is who we're helping. We're helping you. We're helping the people that currently live here. People that might want to live here, people child care workers. It's to your benefit. And to the builder, mortgage lending community, so on and so forth. I think that's incredibly valuable, hard to quantify, but I always put a premium on the idea of communication and outreach in this discussion. Because really, there's no immutable law of the universe that says we can't build these things, right? There's no physical law that we're fighting against, like the speed of light, that we just can't break that barrier. Housing is not that. Housing and constraints on it are just purely human creations, right? And outreach and changing people's minds is a huge part of what can and cannot happen. I hope that answered your question.
Chris, with all of your doom and gloom, one thing I'm wondering about is, have you done any work on sort of the supply that's being created? I mean, how many units are in production in the city of Everett? Are you familiar with that, with those figures that would help us understand? And are they market rate, low income, middle income? I mean, there's so many different categories.
So I can find out by sending an email. Not off the top of my head, no, but the problem is, even if, and I often talk about this with smaller cities, most recently the city of Snohomish, even if you, including Everett, blow up your zoning code, like anything goes, do whatever you want, and people actually take advantage of that, still prices will be unaffordable. because we're dealing with a regional issue. And this is part of my presentation normal spiel that I didn't include, is this is more than just Everett. It's not your problem alone to fix. It's not Snohomish's problem alone to fix, or anybody's. It's a regional issue that starts in Seattle and goes north, south, east, and west from there. We're 50,000 units behind 2 years ago, according to the Puget Sound Regional Council. You know, Everett's not going to produce 50,000 units of housing 2 years ago, right? You can't, and you shouldn't have to. This is something where Everett has its part to play, but in addition to producing more units, to the pipeline that's producing units right now, it's use your voice to bring along other jurisdictions in Snohomish County, to bring along King County jurisdictions and Pierce County jurisdictions at PSRC meetings, at other regional meetings, and use your voice, because, you know, get everyone rowing together is the only way that this really gets meaningfully addressed. So it's not to dodge your question about the pipeline of units coming online in Everett. Also, just because I don't know the answer right now, but I'd be happy to get back to you on that. It's more than that, because it shouldn't be your problem alone to address. And, you know, the city of Redmond, for example, is recently been celebrated in the Puget Sound Business Journal as producing 600 units of multifamily tax-exempt apartments. That's kind of a drop in the bucket against that 50,000 unit number. So, you know, should it be celebrated? Yes. Is it enough? No. Will it make a material difference on the price of housing in Redmond and the surrounds? Probably not, because people move, right? They move to a place where they can afford to live. So we need something that's much more broadly reaching. So
Thank you.
I am actually an optimist, if I can speak on that point, because what I hope that I can present today or in future conversations with the council and the city is, you know, as much as I'm talking about negativity in this presentation, this is also opportunity. You know, it's opportunity to reduce inflationary pressure on the price of goods and services. It's an opportunity to have more people work in childcare, to have more people driving school buses. Think about the benefit that we get from that sort of activity, which is the result of us taking action. So really, instead of saying, well, this presentation is super, you know, basically Eeyore in a PowerPoint slide, thank you. It's really opportunity. It's what we can realize, and it's a benefit that we can take advantage of. So I hope that comes through as well. And again, with the community outreach and advocacy, that's something that I hope is put front and center. So.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogely.
Just to go off the ER, it can also be Tigger.
Yes,
Tigger
exactly.
zoning. And you mentioned that people go to where they can afford, and it used to be that they couldn't afford Everett, so they'd maybe move to Marysville or Arlington. And I know you know this answer, even if it's not a specific number. How far do you have to go these days?
Skagit County. Darrington, median sale price for Darrington is $400,000. There's not a whole lot of rental stock in the town of Darrington. So I don't really have an answer for rental, although I could get it for Skagit County, but it's far. You go really far. On average, Snohomish County for rentals, we're looking at $21.90 a month between a studio to a 3-bedroom apartment. That's mostly 1s and 2s. So, you know, whether you go to Stanwood or whether you try to stay in Everett or South, you're going to be paying a lot.
Thank you. And I went to Lake Wenatchee this weekend, and I only mention it because Highway 2 between, I'm geography challenged. Let's say Gold Bar, Wallace Falls area and almost home was Google Map red line.
Parking lot.
Yeah, and I didn't want the lanes wider. I just wanted more people in each car. So there is a point in there, and you'll figure it out.
Yes. I recall watching testimony down in Olympia many, many years ago, way before the pandemic, of the mayor of Chelan, I believe, talking about how Chelan was getting crushed by housing prices because people, this is pre-pandemic, we're not all teleworking, remember, people were migrating over the mountains to Chelan because it was more affordable. This is an issue that can drive very, very far. There are people that LEHD on the map tool shows that a lot of people drive from Skagit County or Spokane to work in Everett. Maybe not every day, but they do. That's a real thing. So ask your fire department, firefighters, where they live. probably far.
Councilmember Ryan.
Thank you. Oh, that made me lose my train of thought. Yeah, I had a friend whose dad worked for Woodinville Fire and lived in Wenatchee. So along that same vein, I was talking with my husband about this over the weekend of how remote work is also changing the housing landscape because tech workers can afford to move to rural areas and, have the land and horses and fancy things. And so that's doing to smaller towns and their affordability and whatnot. So maybe that could be a discussion at a future meeting.
Absolutely.
Which leads to my next point, which is supporting the quarterly update suggestion. Thank you.
My pleasure. I do have data on that from the Census Bureau that shows working from home taking off in 2021 and 2022, primarily for high-wage workers. There's lots of interesting stuff. If you have talked to me or talked to Councilmember Fogley, who's heard it from me because she's trapped in bi-weekly meetings with me, it's so interesting to watch the impact of telework and on commuting patterns and transit modes. In the city of Everett, just off the top of my head, people that walk to work on average make about $25,000, $28,000 a year. In Everett, if you're a worker in Everett, you're not walking to work because you're health conscious, you're walking to work because you have no other option. Just things like that. One other thing I wanted to go back to on opportunity, that this isn't just your noises. I can't believe I just did that in a public meeting. About opportunity is, think about your firefighters. Maybe your police force or your firefighters don't want to live in the same community that they police or fight fires in, but think about the benefit of having firefighters living in your neighborhoods. When the big one happens, all the bridges, I've been in state emergency management department meetings where the big map of all the bridges that are gonna fall down, there's a lot. Those firefighters are not getting to you. If your neighbor is a firefighter or a nurse or another emergency responder, you have a great benefit to community resilience, right? Or think about the benefit to living next to Judge Smith, right? Or a lawyer or someone, a dentist even. Think about the life-altering benefit that can bring to children, that you get to hang out with Judge Smith's kids. Think about what that can mean to a child and their trajectory in life. And we don't have that anymore because judges are among the people who can't afford to live in our communities. Hey, I got appointed to the bench by the governor. Yay, I'm going to go live in a townhome in Marysville. That's community resilience is another unquantifiable missed opportunity, but also benefit that we can realize. So,
Thank you. Any final questions?
sorry.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate your being here and all the great information you have, and we will, I'll work with administration on making this more of a regular update, so we
Very much, and
can.
I promise to have
keep
more
abreast.
uplifting or at least interesting, different, very.
Maybe we will try to match it with some
Mittens.
information from Yorick about production.
Very good. All right, thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, you too.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, that brings us to public comment. Angie, do we have anyone signed up to speak for public comment this evening?
Good evening, President Stone Cipher. We do not have any public comment.
Thank you. We'll move on to council comments and liaison reports. We're starting with Councilmember Zarlingo.
Thank you. A couple of things tonight. The first one in the category of boring but important. There are, as a number of you know, two companies in Everett working on nuclear fusion as an electrical power source. It's especially important because it's the kind that can provide consistent power in all kinds of conditions, particularly in ways that wind and solar can't. The kind of renewable thing that our hydropower has been good at for so many years. And as a council member and an electrical engineer, I thought I was the right person to join other elected officials in attending a Council on Foreign Relations presentation on nuclear fusion and the future of energy. I wanted to understand that future a little bit better since we've got an element of it here. And I've been watching fusion since another student in the late 1970s in engineering was working on early magnetic confinement. I've been looking for it someday to come as a potential power source, especially because it's cleaner than the fission nuclear reactors we're familiar with, and it's able to generate lots of power from the same process that powers the sun. That's the difference between splitting the atom that we've been doing so far and fusing atoms together. I'm unfortunately not enough of a power engineer or a physicist to have confidence either way in the practical future of nuclear energy startups like what we've got here. But it does seem clear to me from this presentation that if we're going to have practical fusion energy plants in our lifetime, it will be from the kind of innovative small-scale reactors like the ones being worked on here in Everett. And not the giant science experiments that have been getting a lot of publicity, but that are really focused on the fundamental physics of fusion. Places like Lawrence Livermore National Lab, the National Ignition Facility, or the ones in France and the UK. And notably, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, close to my heart, have called Everett Fusion City, USA. We have specifically Helion and Zap Energy here, who've gotten significant startup funds and are working really hard on this. We also actually, interestingly enough, have a fission lab that is different than fusion with distinct reactor plans, TerraPower. So good news here. If any one of these things hit, I think it's going to be great for Everett in terms of jobs and technology. And if we're going to have this fusion power that's been dreamed of for so long, I think this is where it's going to come from. Then the other thing I wanted to note about, and it was interesting to see for tonight's presentation and looking back at the book from a few months ago, Homelessness is a Housing Problem. And that made a lot of sense to me, but what I realized, last week I went to the presentation organized by the mayors and business leaders for public safety. Sam Quinones did a presentation on particularly meth and fentanyl, the modern versions of these things, which are nightmarish even compared to the earlier versions of it. And one thing I realized is how much that the drug problems are driving, driving mental illness and driving homelessness. So it's a real double whammy for us. That presentation last week is not online, but if people want to understand the situation better, what we're facing, and how much more serious and how much more hazardous it is in the short term, you can go onto YouTube and there's Quinones has done this presentation or versions of it otherwise. One's called America and Hope in the Time of Fentanyl and Meth. But if you just search on Sam Quinones on YouTube, you'll find that. And I think it's a particularly good complement to the August 23rd presentation here to the City Council from the jail on drug treatment and rehab, some job training at the jail. That's available on the City of Everett YouTube channel. If we're going to make progress on this, I think we need to understand treatment, the drugs, the options we have, what things are working. It's encouraging some of what Quinones talks about, but what's discouraging is kind of the short time we have to act on some of this because the trajectory to overdose and death in a lot of cases with fentanyl and the modern version, this P2P, new version of meth and fentanyl, is a lot shorter than the heroin and cocaine and things we had and even the meth we had in the past. So I'd encourage anybody who's interested in this and what the family of potential solutions are to see what sub-communities have done and indeed what's been done here in this jail to take a look at those presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Vogeley.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Indigenous Peoples Day is October 9th. That's Monday, so there's going to be should have brought it with me, but I see the flyer in my head. There is something happening at the Evergreen Branch Library with a local author. So look it up. Just go to epls.org. And that was a lot of interesting information. I wanted to also bring up that we also need help and resources for homeless folks that do not have substance abuse disorder, do not have mental health issues, and have not been incarcerated. There's a whole lot of those out there as well. And considering that it's almost impossible to get resources even when you are addicted or have other such issues. You can't even get on a list if you don't have any problems except aren't housed. You know, I've met, and recently, so many people that are like, the only way I can get help is if I say that I've got a drug problem, and I don't have a drug problem, and I don't want to lie to get help. So let's keep that in mind as well. That's all, I think. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fosse.
No questions or comments.
Thank you. Vice President Tui.
We had a great committee meeting, and I'll let Chair talk about that, but a great presentation from Bridgeways, very informative, so that's all I have, thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Schwab.
Yes, I'd just like to know, especially neighbors in the 3rd District, but for all Everett neighbors, there is a notice of a SEPA application for a children's and women's facility on the corner of Suvers-Ducey Road and Glenwood. You have until the 10th here to submit any comments, so I know there's been notices sent out. I just had a couple of things from administration, and I'll actually have many things with this project. One thing I just want to make public that I think is probably one of the most important things and effective means of tool of educating those that live around these communities is have a resident manual. And I know that the Interfaith Family organization did one for Faith Lutheran for that shelter, and it was well received by the community. And so I've asked the Volunteers of America for it, but I think that is very important. And I think I'm already starting to get questions. The conduct of those that occupy these seems to be in question, not necessarily for me, but from those that live around these communities. So also, just at some time here the next week, if you wouldn't mind sending a project site detail, other than just what's on the notice application, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryan.
Great, thank you. Earlier this evening, we had our Housing and Human Services Committee meeting, and some representatives from Bridgeways joined to share more about their program. Bridgeways is the organization that we partner with through our mental health treatment courts and also through our case manager program at the city, and they provide, help people get connected to services, and just really glad to hear that we're in good hands with the folks that are going through those systems to be put on a pathway towards stability. So go ahead and check it out on YouTube if you get a chance. For other comments, this week is Week Without Driving. It's the 3rd annual event hosted by Disability Rights Washington to bring awareness to barriers in our transportation system for people who don't or can't drive. As I shared last week at the meeting, this is my 2nd year participating, and I have tons of lessons learned already, and it's only Wednesday, and we'll definitely share a longer update next week on all of my lessons learned. I did stumble across the mayor's proclamation on Facebook designating this week as the Week Without Driving, and I'm not sure if there's opportunities in the future for joint proclamations or individual council proclamations, but would love to see that in the future for joint endeavors, especially for things that council shared is important to them. I also stumbled across an announcement on Facebook yesterday that applications for boards and commissions for the city are now open. I'd requested this information from the mayor 2 weeks ago at our monthly meeting and had been waiting to hear from our director of outreach and engagement so I could share it with my neighborhood associations. So I was frustrated to come across the information online. So since I did come across it, I did my own research, and I would like to share with folks that there are vacancies on the Diversity Advisory Board for 10 positions, the Citizens Advisory Board for 2 positions, and the Planning Commission for 1 position. Applications are online and due November 2nd. And then wanted to mention too that tomorrow is the Veteran Stand Down Resource Fair at the Carl Gibson Center. It's hosted by a number of different local organizations for veterans. So if you know of a veteran who is in need, or if you are a veteran who is in need, head over to the Carl Gibson Center from 9 to 4 tomorrow, and there's a number of different organizations that can help veterans get connected with legal services and resources and housing, and the whole, and even with the VA to get resource connected, or service connected. So folks, if they could bring their DD-214, or if you are missing your DD-214, they have folks on site that can help retrieve it as well. So just wanted to help get the word out for that. Thanks.
Thank you. And I too had a resident ask me about council or about city boards and commissions appointments, and I thought, oh, I must have missed something, so I went back and looked at the council digest. I didn't see it in there either, so just kind of a reminder, maybe we should make sure that when those things go out, the council knows, because people do ask us about them, so appreciate that. That's all for me. Do we have an administrative update tonight?
Yeah, I have 3 items, and then first, just an apology to both of you and to the whole council. Councilmember Ryan, I had that task to follow up on the boards and commissions posting, and I just found it, and there's a little checkbox, and it's empty. So I'm sorry that we didn't get that to you, and good point, Council President Stonecipher, about just keeping an eye on those things and making sure that you guys are notified. My 3 items. So at last week's council meeting, Councilmember Vogely asked about the professional service agreements related to the Project Labor Agreements Task Force. City worked with 2 consultants experienced in PLA negotiation and administration. Both of those agreements were for an amount not to exceed $23,500. One with Locke Advisory Solutions and one with Intelligent Partnerships. Neither of them have been paid yet. They're working through the procurement process and, the paperwork and all that. One, Intelligent Partnerships is invoiced for $4,525, and Locke has invoiced for $2,925. So they'll be paid, but they got to go through that process with procurement still. Councilmember Vogel, you also asked about fireworks, and the tragically failed show from the 4th of July. The company that was responsible for that did actually overnight a check the day after the holiday, and it was received in finance on July 6th, and I'm sure promptly deposited. And then lastly, on a different note, you might have heard that a former member of the city family passed away last week, Deborah Bryant. She gave many, many years of service to the city, in particular as finance director and in city administration. And so on behalf of the mayor and the city administration, our thoughts are with her family in this difficult time. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you. And we'll now move to our city attorney, Mr. Hall. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Vogely.
Thank you. I'm also doing Week Without Driving, and I have failed to mention it twice, and I'm failing miserably at it, but I've done it before. Okay, so there's that. And I know that we've also discussed boards and commissions, so those are good. But whenever I go online, and I am looking at archived meetings and whatnot, and I know we had an online, we're looking into all of the issues that are there. When I click on, I would like to see not boards and commissions, city council subcommittees. It just goes to all of the boards and commissions. And I know that subcommittees are in the council archives, but the titling of the links is misleading. Yeah, now you know.
Yeah, kind of a structural problem, but.
Okay. And I have a great question for Susie, and I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, what does the city attorney's office have for us this evening?
I did not go to the Sam Quinones event that Councilmember Zelingo mentioned, but I will say that both his Quinones 2015 book Dreamland and his 2021 book The Least of Us are excellent if you want to learn more about the history of the opioid epidemic, which I know is important to all of us. No further report from the legal department and no executive session. Thank you.
Thank you. We are going on to our consent agenda, and do I hear a motion to approve our 3 consent items?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Zarlingo,
Yes.
Councilmember Vogely,
Yes.
Councilmember Fosse,
Yes.
Vice President Tui,
Yes.
Councilmember Schwab.
Yes.
Councilmember Ryan.
Yes.
President Stonecipher.
Yes, and that brings us to the end of our agenda. With no further business, we are now adjourned.